All right, today class, we're going to continue our discussion in our class using smart objects in Photoshop. Last week we looked at how to create a smart object and the reason for using smart objects. So what we're going to do today, we're going to create some smart objects. I went on Google and downloaded some photo frames for us to use in today's class. I'm going to start by going to the menu bar, going to File and Open. And under Open, I have access to my photo frames. You have to navigate to wherever you have saved your photo frames on your flash drives. And when you locate that photo frames folder, we're going to select frame number 6 to start with. Also, when you first open up an image, it may fill the screen, it may not fill the screen. I always like to do a Control-0 to fill the screen with the image that's being used. Okay. We're going to start out with this gold frame. The gold frame is the easiest frame to use. It's a rectangle. It's pretty straightforward. It's not on some type of weird angle, off to the left or to the right. It's pretty much straight on, so it's going to be the easiest of all of the frames to use. So let's get started. First, let's get our rectangle marquee tool. We looked at that last week in our introduction to Photoshop. You hover over your rectangle marquee in your toolbox. And as you hover over, you get a little pop out. So let's click there. You may have the rectangle marquee or you may have the elliptical marquee tool. So the way you get to the rectangle marquee, if you have the elliptical marquee, is simply hold down that left mouse button and then select rectangle marquee tool. You can also select the rectangle marquee tool or the marquee tool simply by pressing the M key. So next, we're going to create a selection that's going to serve as our placeholder. So here I'm just going to take my rectangle marquee and I'm simply going to draw a rectangle on the outside of my frame. It really doesn't matter how big this rectangle is, but I like to make the rectangle pretty big. That way you can put in a pretty big image to kind of maintain the resolution of the image. I could have easily created my rectangle the size of the inner portion of my frame area, that white part there where the actual picture would reside, but I chose to make it the same size as my frame, or roughly the same size as the entire frame. It really doesn't matter what size you make it, but I guess I have a habit of making things larger and not smaller. So once we have our rectangle, we see our dotted lines there, we're going to create a new layer. And we do that by going to our layers panel, and I'm hovering over create new layer, click there, and we get a new layer, layer number 1. I'm not concerned about the background layer name. We can leave that as background, or you can change it to picture layer or whatever. Always remember to unlock a layer. Simply grab the lock and you can drag it down to the trash can and it unlocks the layer, and we see Photoshop automatically rename that layer from background to layer 0. So back to my layer 1. I'm going to call this my image. Remember, double click the word and it'll allow you to be able to change the name. Change the name and press enter to commit the name change. So now I have a new layer that's going to serve as my place for my placeholder. I've called it image, and now I must fill it with something. Last week we learned how to do a edit fill, menu bar edit fill, and then either use in the foreground or the background. Today we're going to use a shortcut. We're going to learn some shortcut keys today. I like shortcuts. Makes it a lot quicker to do things. Here we see that my foreground is black, my background is white. If yours is not black and white, either click on the reset the default foreground background colors, or you can press the D key on the keyboard. Now here's a couple of really neat little shortcuts. If I do Control, hold down the Control key and press the Delete key, I get white filled. So that would be my background color. If I want to use my foreground color, I simply hold down the Alt key and tap the Delete key, and that gives me my background color. Now remember, my layer 0, whereas my original picture is still there, I can click the eye on my image layer to hide it. See, it's still there. All we've really done is fill that selection with that color black. So now let's get rid of our selection. From the menu bar, we can go select and then deselect, but then we also see that that's Control D. So I want us to get in the habit of learning and using the shortcut keys because they make things a lot quicker. So next we're going to convert our image layer into a smart object, and we do that simply by going over to our image layer, right click, and then select Convert to Smart Object. There we have created our first smart object. I know it's a smart object because one, I can see the little smart object icon there. That little thumbnail there, that little icon indicates that this layer has been converted to a smart object. So now here where the beauty of a smart object comes in, we want to bring down the size of this smart object, because remember, this smart object represents the image area in the side of the photo frame. Remember, we just made the rectangle larger than the photo frame area and even the photo frame itself. So now we're just simply going to downsize it. And from there, we can go to our menu bar and edit and free transform. But we also see that under free transform, we can do a Control T to enter into free edit. Now, once we enter into free edit, we see that there's an X here. That X indicates that this is a smart object. So from here, I can start bringing down the size of this smart object. And we're going to resize this smart object to where it fits inside of our photo frame area. This is the area where the picture inside of the frame would reside. Okay, beautiful. And then to commit it, I can either click on the check mark in the upper right hand corner, commit, or simply double click or press enter on the keyboard. Okay, so now that looks pretty good. It's pretty centered from left to right, top to bottom. If you need to move it around, we can get the move tool. Hover over the move tool and you see pressing the V key gives you the move tool. The move tool then allows you to move that smart object around inside that frame area so you can kind of get it lined up. Or here's another neat thing about selecting the move tool. Once you selected the move tool, you can use the arrow keys on the keyboard to move things left, right, up, down. So here I'm simply using the arrow keys to get my my smart object inside my picture frame. Perfect. So here's another little neat thing. Remember, our original rectangle was larger than the picture frame, and even though we've downsized our smart object to fit inside of the area where the image would reside, our smart object, when we want to place an image inside of that smart object, it returns to the same size that we initially started with. So meaning, when we double click on the smart object to place an image inside of it, it's not going to be the same size that it is now because we've downsized the smart object. It's going to be the larger rectangle area that we initially started with. So let's do that Let's enter in a picture, insert a picture, or place a picture. I might say place, insert, but the proper command is place. So let's double click on that smart object, and this is where some of us get a little bit confused and turned around. Let's double click the smart object, and here we've opened up the smart object itself that we've created. If you look here at your image, the title bar here, we see that this is our smart object that we've now opened, and this one is our original picture frame, and this is the smart object. This is where we place the image that's going to appear in the photo frame. I've included a couple of images of my wife. You don't have to use her images, you can use your own images, but just keep in mind this is a landscape image, meaning that it's wider than it is tall. It's not a portrait image, meaning that it's taller than it is wide. So I want to insert a landscape image. So to place an image, on the menu bar we're going to go to File, Place, and from here I'm simply going to select that that landscape image of my wife that I included, or you can use your own image at this time. Just make sure it's landscape. It doesn't have to be, but it's a lot easier if it's a landscape image. From here, because it's an image of a person, so I don't want to distort the proportions, I'm going to hold down the Shift key while dragging the corners, and the corners only, to resize this image to fit in that rectangle. So we got to get this image to fit inside of that rectangle. That's our smart object. We'll see in a second exactly what that is doing. Also remember, when you're placing an image inside of a smart object, it automatically converts it to a smart object, and I can see that because I have this X across the image. So now to commit, I can either double click the image, I can press enter, or I can click on the commit in the upper right hand corner. Doesn't matter which one you use. Then to update my smart object, I'm simply going to click the close, the X on the smart object. Photoshop prompts me to save the changes. I click yes, and I'm returned back to my image of my wife there inside of the photo frame. And that concludes our first ever smart object photo frame.